Hey, good evening, everyone. Josh of Severe Weather. Welcome to my channel. If you're a first-time guest, if you're coming regularly, or if you maybe got brought here by Yahoo News or the Naples Daily News, welcome. And obviously, significant storm getting ready to move into an area of Florida that is not accustomed to seeing storms as strong. A historic event as Hurricane Idalia continues to rapidly intensify, now up to Category 2 as of early tonight, likely heading to 3 later tonight, possibly Category 4, before landfall expected just after sunrise tomorrow, kind of in that 7 to 8 a.m. time frame. So a very dangerous setup. Not a lot of changes from this morning, but I wanted to give you all a special update here as we do have new data coming in and the storm is quickly strengthening. So I'm going to spend most of the video talking about Idalia. I'll also briefly talk about Franklin and a couple other systems, but not going to spend a lot of time on those, to be honest with you all. We are seeing what pretty much I've expected all along here, rapid intensification over the northeastern Gulf of Mexico and storm that is continuing on a pretty straightforward path here towards the Big Bend region with landfall expected tomorrow morning. Maximum winds will likely get up at least a high-end Category 3, if not Category 4, and wind speeds expected to be somewhere in that 125 to 140 mile per hour range upon landfall early in the day tomorrow, then quick weakening as it moves off to the north and east over northeastern Florida and southeast Georgia. And then some interesting forecasting that we're going to have to do next week. Unfortunately, the system's not just going to get kicked out to sea like you would expect. It's going to run into an area of weaker steering, and several solutions have shown it making a clockwise loop and stalling, maybe dissipating, maybe re-strengthening in areas near to the northeast of the Bahamas. So if you're on the southeast coast, especially Florida, but even up into the Carolinas, you may have something to watch here after Labor Day next week. Still very uncertain to even make a quick call on that. I know my graphic this morning did lean in this direction. I still think that's certainly possible, and I'm going to show you guys why. We saw that with Hurricane Ivan in 2004. That hit the western panhandle as a major storm. I think it was a Category 3 or low end 4. Came up through the Appalachians, then moved out to sea, and a very similar steering pattern took it back down and made another landfall in eastern Florida, and it tracked into the Gulf as a much weaker system. One thing I will say, whatever track it takes, I don't think this system is going to be nearly as strong as it is in the Gulf right now. We're talking maybe a Category 1 hurricane at worst, but probably a tropical storm due to some environmental effects. So very erratic motion by this weekend, but I think we get through Labor Day without any major impacts. The time frame would be after that. But I know you all are obviously concerned about what's going on now, so this is very much speculative and uncertain at this point, and I'm just showing you some possible tracks, either making a turn or a small loop and turning back towards the north, or maybe stalling and eventually getting picked up towards Bermuda and moving northeast, or what the GFS and a few other models have hinted at, a turn back towards the Florida coast, or at least the southeastern coast. So all of those are possible solutions at this point. This is a historic event. Yes, every hurricane is historic, but this has never happened before. We have never seen a major hurricane hit this portion of Florida, entering Appalachia Bay. This is the last time to get prepared. This is from the National Weather Service in Tallahassee. Feel free to reach out to them if you have any questions about it. But since the 1850s, we have never had a recorded major hurricane come up and hit this area. It's not as populated as the Western Panhandle and the Emerald Coast, not as populated as the Citrus coast down to the Tampa Bay area, but it is very vulnerable. The way that the water can get pushed up into this marshland here makes it extremely vulnerable, like you would see in parts of southwestern Louisiana, for example, or in other parts of the Gulf Coast. And obviously, we don't really have a benchmark to measure a storm like this by, because we've never had a storm this strong hit this part of the world. So unfortunately, there's got to be a first time for everything. Here is a look at the overall map, and we still have Hurricane Franklin, which is starting to weaken, a major hurricane, Idalia, which is strengthening, a new tropical depression, which is no threat, and an area that we're watching in the eastern Atlantic that, again, will not be a threat. Here is the track of Hurricane Ian. It's like last year all over again. I'm sorry, guys. Idalia. Please forgive me. And you can see a very, very well-behaved track right up towards the eastern half of the Big Bend. And I do think this may actually have to come west a little bit more towards the western end of Taylor County. But Taylor County right in the mix of things, as well as getting down towards Cedar Key. All the strongest winds are going to be just on the eastern and northern side of this track. So a lot of this coast is going to see a lot of water piling up here by tomorrow morning. We are going to see storm surge and locally strong winds all the way into places like Clearwater, St. Pete, Oldsmar, even down to Longboat Key potentially, or at least to Bradenton, where we do have a hurricane warning in effect. But I think the strongest winds go near and just to the east of the center here. Tallahassee, you are under a hurricane warning, especially to your south. Keep an eye on things if they adjust a little bit more to the west. And then as we go inland, we are going to see strong winds carrying into central and southeast Georgia, as well as the eastern portion of South Carolina and coastal North Carolina as well. Here's a look at Franklin, expected to stay safely to the northwest of Bermuda. Both of these storms are almost the same size now. Franklin a little bigger, but I think Idalia will catch him pretty soon here. And very rare to see two large storms like this so close together in this portion of the world. This is a generational event for many of us here. Here is a look at the wide view, and you can see just the overall pattern here in place. And really, aside from these two storms, not much to stress about. Tropical depression out here. But as we zoom in a little bit closer, we can see that the outflow continues to grow over Idalia. It's going over extremely warm waters in the northeastern Gulf, and there's nothing stopping it from strengthening except for land itself tomorrow morning. If this were moving slower, or if there were no land there, it would be going to Category 5. I don't think that happens, though. I think we're looking at lower end Category 4 at the very worst at this point. And the reason why is the storm is moving quicker than storms like Michael and Ian did when they made landfall in Florida. It's really gotten its act together, but it is going to be running out of breathing room. So only about another 12 hours to intensify, really about 10 hours by the time a lot of you watch this video, up until landfall here in the morning tomorrow, sometime between 7 and 9 in the morning. Looking at the view to the east here, you can see these two storms are not going to merge into a big storm. I've seen some questions about that. What's going to happen is Franklin is going to get picked up by this trough that's moving into the eastern United States. Let me draw that out for you guys here. And this trough is going to swing through here and pick up Franklin with it and turn it away in this direction. That trough's moving quickly, and it will be leaving and will not pick up Idalia. Idalia is actually just going around the area of this periphery of this high pressure ridge in place right here, and it's just finding its way around the western side of that ridge. But it is not going to be making this trough here. You do see the outflow is growing here. It's got a very well-defined central dense overcast and a little bit of an eye popping out here in the center. Not fully clear of clouds like you see here with Franklin. There's also a little bit of wind shear out of the southwest, but because the storm is moving so quickly, it's not really stopping it from intensifying. Usually wind shear does that if it's going in the opposite direction of the storm. In this case, if anything, it's actually aiding in its intensification, and we just don't see that too often. So after this trough leaves and we see Idalia come up in here, we see a ridge of high pressure that builds in, and that is going to slow down the progress of the storm by the time it gets out into here Thursday night into Friday. And we are going to be left with a much uncertain pattern due to a building high pressure ridge, which I will show you guys here a little bit later in the video. In the Eastern Atlantic, we are going to watch this system coming off, but it does not look like something that will be a problem in the U.S. So Idalia is going over the warmest waters in the Atlantic Basin right now, 31 to 32 degrees Celsius. That's 88 to 90 degrees crossing those waters. So there's really no sign that this intensification process is going to slow any tonight. It's just going to keep going and going and going. Here's a look at our visible satellite as we now approach sunset as of the time of this video. And you can see very intense thunderstorms surrounding the center of the storm. Still some clouds filling the eye, but on the radar, you'll be able to see that that eye is cleared out. Just some high clouds going over it. And here is the Florida Panhandle in the Big Bend, which await a very dangerous situation here tonight. Here is a look at that center of the storm right at sunset. You can see it here just to the east of 85 west. This is 84 west. The track will turn it more to the northeast, and it could go anywhere from here to about here. Every little wobble will make a difference, but overall errors at this close to landfall should be about 30 miles or less. So somewhere in this zone is going to see that landfall. You can see very intense storms on the eastern side. Those are going to translate up in this direction and here. And it's possible we see hurricane conditions here later this evening around the Tampa Bay area. And in particular, the area of Pinellas County and western, I believe it's Bradenton County. And forgive me if I'm wrong here. I've been through most of these places before. Here is the infrared. You can see the eye is cleared out here on the infrared, and everything is wrapped around a very well-defined core. Yes, there's a little bit of wind shear here, which is keeping the far western and southwestern part of the storm from growing, but we very much see it growing more on the northern and eastern side, and a lot of intense rainfall rates getting ready to move into Florida here. Here's our forecast track as of 8 p.m. We may actually see an update here at or 5 p.m. We may see an 8 o'clock update, so I'm going to come back to this. But you can see very clear track here, turning northeastward here, and then northeast tomorrow. It'll be weakening to tropical storm intensity by dinner time tomorrow night in southeast Georgia. But see, still a hurricane in southern Georgia. What happens with these storms as they strengthen upon landfall, it takes it longer for the winds to die down because they have that momentum. It's like a race car going over a speed bump. It's still going to go fast, but not as fast, but it's got that acceleration to it. So we will see this still a very intense storm tomorrow afternoon in southern Georgia. We could see a very intense core coming through places like Valdosta here in the early afternoon hours. Then it'll weaken to a tropical storm near Charleston in the overnight hours tomorrow night, and it should emerge over the coastline near Myrtle Beach, near Calabash, North Carolina, near Bald Head Island in the morning on Thursday. At that point, we'll probably have a 50 to 60 mile per hour tropical storm, but a big storm with the heavy rain and wind on the northwestern side impacting the Outer Banks potentially here with tropical storm conditions, maybe even far southeastern portions of Virginia Beach. And then uncertainty after that, we see a slower motion. We see a turn to the southeast. Bermuda would be in the path here, but probably not before the end of this weekend. Unfortunately, there are some options that take this back towards Bahamas and Florida. There's some options that take it here in between the Outer Banks and Bermuda. And there are still a few options that take it out back to Bermuda very slowly and then push it away after that. And again, it's very uncertain. I know my graphic this morning had it out to about here. I stopped it before Florida, and the GFS is still showing that. I'm going to show you that in a little bit. There are a few other models that don't bring it quite that far west, and some others that just keep it over in here, even some that try to kill it mostly and turn it into kind of a remnant low due to the surrounding dry air. So we got a lot on the plate here to worry about the next few days. After this hits tomorrow morning, we're not even close to being done with it. You see the chance for tropical storm force winds gets all the way up to places like Florence and Fayetteville and Elizabeth City, North Carolina, as far west as Panama City Beach, Destin, and Fort Walton Beach. You see the greatest flood risk will end up being on the western side of the circulation, right here through central Georgia, into the Midlands of South Carolina, into the coastal plain and down eastern parts of North Carolina, and a threat for flash flooding all the way up into the western part of Virginia and West Virginia. Here's the latest recon observations. And you can see there has been a bit of a wobble to the right, but now a wobble back to the left. Here you've got kind of a circulation center. Let me pull up my pen again. I have to hide it here. I'm using Zoom. But here's the center right in here at getting close to 27 north and just east of 85 west. You can see the wind speeds upon the last pass here were down in the whites here, which indicate almost Category 3 strength. So this very well could be close to Category 3 as we speak. The pressure has been dropping as much as 10 millibars an hour over the last couple of hours. We were in the 970s this afternoon, now in the 960s, possibly even in the 950s by the time some of you watch it. But you can see these flight level winds are between 96 and 113 knots on this graphic from tropicaltidbits.com. And yeah, just a very intense storm. There's another plane flying through the northern portion. So two planes are in here. This one measured a 965 millibar pressure, which is consistent with a higher end Category 2 hurricane, but flight level winds approaching that Category 3 strength on the eastern side here of the eye. So the storm is still continuing to intensify at a pretty fast rate, the kind of rate we saw during Ian and Michael and Ida and Laura and other storms that went to town here in the northern Gulf of Mexico. This one doing the exact same thing. And we're going to continue to have planes through the storm in the overnight hours. I'll probably be asleep at that point, but I know those of you up here are going to be very nervous about it, and rightfully so. But I expect in the morning we're going to see pressures in this area down into the 940s. Could it even get into the 930s? Nothing would surprise me anymore with what I'm seeing with these storms in the Gulf. So the lower that pressure as it keeps dropping, the higher the winds get. They may take a little bit of while to respond, but they will definitely intensify. Here are the latest models. Very good agreement coming through the Carolinas here in 48 hours. Then after that, we see a split. A few models will slowly move it off to the northeast, others stall it west of Bermuda, and several models have been showing off and on a track back towards Florida, which is very much possible. I would not call it an outlier at this point. In fact, the GFS first showed it. Now you see other models trending in that direction, like the HWRF. The Canadian is showing it as well. But we've got a lot of time before we can make a call on that. Here you can see the latest intensity forecasts all showing close to Category 3. I already think we're pretty much there now. So the models are still playing catch up on intensity. And the rapid intensification model says it will be a higher end Category 3. And I still think that's too low. Forecast models that are built for this just never quite capture the rate of intensification. They do show it happening, but they just don't show it quickly enough. We saw this with Franklin yesterday afternoon. It was predicted to be a Category 3 at the high end, and it went well into the 4s just 12 hours after that forecast was made. So very much that is the situation we're looking at tonight. Peak storm surge, 10 to 15 feet, and maybe even a little bit higher if it gets even stronger than this, between the Osceola River and Yankeetown, 7 to 11 down the Chassahowitzka, 6 to 9 down the Anclot River, 4 to 6 here around the Tampa Bay area, and then starting to lessen as we get into Southwest Florida. But on the western side of the circulation, still some pretty high surf all the way back to Carabel and Indian Pass and Apalachicola. On the east coast of Florida, 1 to 3 foot storm surge north of the Flagler-Volusia County line, 1 to 3 feet up to the mouth of the St. Mary's River, 2 to 4 feet with locally higher surge in the Charleston Harbor, where we do have some tidal flooding. Even on a quiet weather pattern, we are going to see some pretty rough surf there in those areas around Isle of Palms, and then 1 to 3 feet South Santee River up to Beaufort Inlet, 2 to 4 feet Neuse and Bay Rivers, Pamlico and Pungo Rivers up to Drum Inlet, 1 to 3 feet across the rest of the Outer Banks, Ocracoke up to Duck. So we are going to see some damage all the way into North Carolina, even though this storm will be weakening significantly at that point. Here's the HAFS model. This is from weatherbell.com. You can see it is showing continual intensification, wind speeds to about 122 miles per hour here, being forecast at 11 o'clock Eastern tonight. The next frame doesn't have that strength, but the frame as we get to close to landfall, well, I think this is a little bit far to the west, shows a potential for winds approaching 140 miles per hour at landfall. So this storm will be at its strongest as it's making landfall, bringing the highest amount of wind surge on the northern and eastern side of it, right up the Appalachia Bay. A very dangerous situation here as we look at potentially a Category 4 hurricane. Then weakening quickly as it moves inland east of Tallahassee, but still hurricane force winds moving up into parts of southern Georgia. This particular model, I think, is weakening it a little bit too quickly, but it does show gradual weakening. And then as we move on into Thursday, the storm moves away from the North Carolina coast, somewhere between Southport and around Ocracoke, somewhere in this area, maybe even closer to New Bern and Jacksonville and those areas here in the morning Thursday. But winds on the backside of the storm could intensify some as we have some trough interaction. We could see wind gusts to 50, maybe even 70 miles per hour in parts of the Outer Banks. As the storm pulls away, this particular model keeps it moving north and east. The global models, on the other hand, do not. And I'm going to show you those differences here. The European here is not strong enough on the winds, but shows you the area that will have the strongest winds. I think we're looking at much more than 56 miles per hour here in Taylor County, Florida, probably gusts over 140, potentially near the coastline. And then you can still see some higher amounts here off the Georgia coast as well. Looking at the Carolinas, we are going to see those winds moving in here tomorrow afternoon into South Carolina, and then tomorrow evening and especially tomorrow night across North Carolina, gust potential of 40 to 50 miles per hour in Myrtle Beach and Wilmington, in Pender County here, all the way up to Onslow County, Croatan County, and Carteret counties as well. And then some strong winds here, according to the European, as we have some trough interaction all the way across the lower Outer Banks here up to Hatteras on Thursday evening. Rainfall totals are going to be pretty significant. You can see the simulated radar here. This is this evening. Then overnight tonight, heavy rain starts to spread inland. And then the heaviest rain will be along the eye wall here early in the day tomorrow, as early as 4 in the morning up the Appalachia Bay. And then dry air moves in behind the circulation, so the rain will quickly let up here by afternoon. And then tropical moisture will feed into the rest of the peninsula well behind our storm as we continue to see some heavier showers and storms across central and south Florida. And apologize here, the NAM model as well is showing the same deal. Not a whole lot of difference here, but it does look wet well into Thursday and Friday over parts of the Florida Peninsula with moisture left over here. Here's a look at potential rainfall totals. This is a blend of all of the models. It shows a stripe of very heavy rain, 6 to 10 inches of rain, right along and just west of the track here of Idalia as it moves inland. Very heavy rain coming up into the Carolinas region. You'll see amounts here could get to as high as 7 to 8 inches in places like Orangeburg, Aiken, Columbia, Lexington County here in South Carolina, 6 inches in Kershaw. 4 to 6 inches here across the eastern part of North Carolina. When you get up to the Triad and Triangle, maybe just a couple of inches. We need some rain for sure. I'm glad it's not any more. Even Charlotte has potentially 3 inches of rain coming, and then some heavier amounts as well in the mountains here as this system is going to bring that moisture north. Now, the end game on this storm remains very uncertain. And the reason why is how the upper level flow turns. We see here this massive trough moving into the eastern United States here tonight and tomorrow. That is picking up Franklin here and turning it away quickly. But that trough is moving so quickly that Idalia is left behind and does not get picked up by it. It does get influenced a little bit by it. That's why it's going around this high pressure region here over the Bahamas here tomorrow night or Thursday night into Friday, but then gets stuck here as a big area of high pressure builds in. And the difference between the Euro and the GFS is that the Euro is a little bit too slow with this trough for it to really stick around for too long, while the GFS is stronger with this high pressure area and faster with the trough and leaves an area of high pressure behind that blocks that eastward progress here of the storm. As we get to the weekend, you see this high building into the northeast and into Atlantic Canada, and then you see a piece of this trough left behind here, kind of a trough split, and that where that ends up is going to make a huge difference in the future of our storm here. Even a couple hundred miles or a day of timing is going to make a massive difference here. One thing is for certain, for Labor Day, it is going to be pretty toasty here again in the Great Lakes and Northeast due to this big ridge building in. But we just don't know yet if Idalia is going to be near Bermuda or if it's going to be trying to go underneath this ridge towards Florida here early next week, or even getting stuck and spinning around for several more days. Fortunately, in an area where the water temperatures are not as hot as they were before, thanks to major Hurricane Franklin cooling those waters down. It's like it took a hot shower and used up all the hot water, and now all we've got left are cooler waters in its wake. See the GFS though? Trough is quicker, Idalia is slower, and as a result, this high is going to try to steer it back towards the southwest over the weekend, and this shows you just, a weakness under a big ridge of high pressure for Labor Day and a very uncertain path after that. So stay tuned on that. Here, if you see the GFS, this is the upper level chart. You can see Idalia right here, or what's left of it. Then you see this big ridge building in. That allows Idalia to turn back to the south and west. And as this high builds in, the flow is out of the northeast to east aloft, rather than out of the west, which you would typically expect this time of the year with a trough in the area. So when the wind is out of the east or northeast aloft, your general motion is to the west. And unfortunately, that is back towards Florida and the southeast. Here you can see the ensembles on the GFS. Not great agreement, but the operational sticking to its guns with the system coming back into the Gulf here next week. The ensemble mean stalling here pretty much between Florida and Bermuda, and then a few ensembles taking it back out to sea here, which is what you would normally expect. The Canadian is a little bit more in agreement that it will not be coming back to Florida, but there are ensembles that do show that. And the European also has ensembles doing that. So a very uncertain future coming. But you can see everything in here that has it towards the Bahamas has a system that's either in green or blue, meaning the pressures are not very deep and that we have a weaker system, probably a tropical storm, at the worst, a Category 1 hurricane. I say at the worst. Franklin is huge here, but it is reaching some cooler waters and starting to weaken. We have wind speeds that are 125 miles per hour, Category 3 at our 8 o'clock advisory. That will continue to pass by to the north of Bermuda here tomorrow and weaken over the open waters of the Atlantic. You can see most of the models agree on that track and the wind speeds coming down here. And then we've got Super Typhoon Saola, Category 5, 160 to 165 mile per hour storm. A massive eye here, moving halfway between Luzon and Taiwan and hitting these islands really hard over the, I believe they're the Kyagan, I believe, are the name of the islands, and it's going to continue west-northwest. You can see sunrise here, stadium effect, just a beautiful system. Amazing that we're talking about two huge storms in the Atlantic. They're not even close to as strong as this one, but it will continue to the west-northwest and may take aim on Hong Kong or portions of China as it will eventually weaken. You can see that here real quickly. Pressures are probably at their strongest in the 920s. They'll come up into the 930s and then weaken significantly as it approaches the China coast. And you can see the European has the strongest winds now staying south of Taiwan. They didn't a few days ago, but now they do. Wanted to go back here and pull up the latest advisory from the National Hurricane Center. And we do have a latest update. Winds are now up to 105 miles per hour. So this will likely be a major hurricane around midnight tonight and may continue to strengthen in the overnight hours. So we're already into a higher end Category 2 storm. Motion is to the north at 16 miles per hour. We'll start to see a bend to the right here later in the night tonight. I hope you all have a wonderful night. Please be safe. My goal here is not to scare people, although it is a scary situation. I just want you to be prepared for the worst, and I really do appreciate your time. If you are new to this channel, please consider subscribing. I'll have a video for you guys in the morning. I'm about to go to sleep. I'll wake up and do another one for you early in the day as our storm gets ready to make landfall. And I cannot do all this without my faith. I'm a Christian man. I give all the glory to God who gives me the strength to do this. Just know, folks, that I am in prayer for everybody going through this storm. It's exciting to see as a meteorologist, but it's also terrifying. I've been through hurricanes. I was a kid that went through Hurricane Andrew in Louisiana in 1992. That wasn't even as bad as it was in Florida. But I saw the widespread devastation that storm left in parts of my state then. And I know, unfortunately, some of you are going to be in that path as well. And my thoughts and prayers are with you. So I'm going to be praying for you. And if you have any other prayer requests, I'm happy to pray for you as well. I hope you have a blessed night. Please get some rest and look forward to seeing you again in the morning. Take care.